We're here in Taipei, Taiwan, a short 100 miles from the epicenter of the worst earthquake in Taiwan in the last 25 years. Have you thought about what you would do if a natural disaster struck while you're traveling, especially in a foreign country? We talk about our experience, the questions it made us ask ourselves, and specific tips on things you can do to be prepared. We'll include a link on our website where you can download a travel packing list for disasters. I'm Judy.
And I'm Kevin. Welcome back to Finding Gina Marie, where we share our lives as full-time travelers and the connections we make along the way. We're here in Taipei, Taiwan, and a recent earthquake really woke us up to some ideas about what's it like to travel and then have disasters happen. I mean, we lived in San Francisco for almost 8 years, and everyone said, how do you live there with all those earthquakes? Well, we barely had anything happen. I mean, there was a couple times you could feel a little bit of a movement.
I mean, it was enough to know that you were having an earthquake.
Right, but nothing like we had here, where literally you knew for an extended period of time you were an earthquake. So this was a very new experience for us.
We're staying in an Airbnb on the 3rd floor of a 5-story building. And just before 8 a.m., I was sitting in bed on my computer, and all of a sudden I felt the bed just rock and sway. And Kevin was in the bathroom and he was coming out, and
yeah, I was grabbing onto the doorway, wondering, okay, this is pretty major. Should we be doing something besides watching it happen? I mean, we have lights hanging on the either side of our bed. You can probably see them in the background, and they were just moving, and our window was open so we could hear the alleyway, which has a lot of AC units and other things out there, making all these rattling and creaking noises. And it kept going. It wasn't like it just ended in 3 seconds like we've been having in the past. This was half a minute, I don't know.
I think it lasted longer than we thought it did, in part because at first I remember asking you, is that an earthquake we're feeling? And like, of course I knew, but I needed to get some sort of a confirmation about what was going on.
After it ended, we had aftershocks.
Well, 15 minutes later, there was another movement that wasn't quite as long, but it was nearly as hard.
Yeah, and it just felt like, okay, this is significant, and luckily we didn't run out of power.
No power. We didn't lose power. We didn't lose internet. And it was interesting because I got an alert on my phone that said like president message. It was in Chinese first, and underneath it said that there was an earthquake. So we definitely knew that's what it was. Right. And in my head, I remembered thinking, I don't speak Chinese, so what will we do to navigate this situation if there's damage or injuries? We didn't get any additional big hits after those first two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we didn't see anything happening outside. We didn't hear of any sirens or anything going on. It wasn't like there was suddenly big alarms going off. It was just, wow, that was significant.
Yeah, and our Airbnb wasn't suddenly tilting sideways or nothing fell.
Right.
So in the scheme of things, it was shocking, and we immediately sent text messages to our daughter and sons letting them know what was going on, and just we're trying to take it in, and then we started looking on the internet to see what was going on.
In fact, I put an app back on my phone that I took off when we left San Francisco. I had Quake Feed on there, and so I could track all the quakes that were happening in California. And I haven't needed it. So it's like, I'll just take it off. I downloaded it, put it back on. I was like, oh, there's like 5 or 6 aftershocks, and then it grew to like 20 or 30. Unfortunately, there was a lot of damage in the epicenter, and we saw some videos of buildings falling down and people getting trapped, and there was a loss of life and lots of people injured. So that was a pretty sad situation. We were saved from that because we were 100 miles away.
Where we are, there was no damage to people or to property.
But it does bring up a conversation point. You know, how should we be handling these kind of situations?
We'd love this to be a dialogue, so you can leave comments with your own ideas and also go to our forum where we can have more extended conversations. And that's at findingginamarie.com/join. And you'll be part of our La Familia forum and be able to leave your own comments too. So we're going to answer for ourselves, but we want you to be thinking of the same thing. And the first question is, have we ever thought about what we would do if there were a natural disaster while we're traveling? And then also on a scale of 1 to 10, how much worry do we have about that?
We have a lot of things to think about when we're traveling, and we really haven't spent too many brain cells thinking about what would happen if disasters struck while we were traveling. We have thought about weather because we travel based on where it's going to be warmer, where the rainy season is, things like that, but not thinking the extreme of what happens if.
We've specifically avoided certain things like monsoon season in Southeast Asia and also the bulk of burning season as well.
And although we haven't traveled extensively during disasters, we have had experiences throughout our lives. We've lived enough decades that a few of them were filled with certain things, like when we were growing up in Buffalo, New York, there was the blizzard of 77, which was this big thing that closed down the city, and we had a few other blizzards too, but this one was in the news all over the country.
69-mile winds and snowdrifts of over 30 feet high. Yeah. I happened to be at the mall and was stuck there, and I had to get home through a snowmobile emergency service.
We had a small family house for my parents, and suddenly 13 people lived there, not just 3 or 4. Now, living in Houston for almost 30 years, we did run into our share of hurricanes.
And one of the worst hurricanes that we went through was in 2008, Hurricane Ike, where we lost all power and connectivity for almost a week. And parts of the city even experienced it longer. No internet, no cell phone.
No drinking water.
We were in Italy in 2019 when the Acqua Alta hit. That was the biggest flood in 50 years. And we had plans to be in Venice for a few days, and we had to reroute our plans because the water levels had reached almost 2 meters high. That's about 6 feet, which meant that the city was underwater. We did manage to go there for a day trip instead of the multiple days we intended to be there. We've had to make pivots and compromises because of natural disasters.
So because we've experienced some of these natural disasters and weather conditions while traveling, like our rerouting in Vietnam, we couldn't do central Vietnam till a couple months later, we know that we do have to make accommodations for travel and understand what's happening in the world. So as far as worrying about natural disasters while we're traveling, I'm kind of at a 2 or 3. I think we talked about it and said, it's just not high on our list of things, although we do want to make sure that we are prepared for some things.
Fear can either freeze you or it can prepare you. There's a quote, "Fear of natural disasters is normal, but preparation transforms fear into confidence."
So how can you be prepared for these situations?
Well, first, before you travel, go ahead and download our free packing list for travelers to prepare for a natural disaster. This way you'll have it handy, you can read through it, you'll know what to pack. Now, we've tried to curate the most comprehensive list that's still practical because people have a tendency to pack their fears. And if you did that, you would have nothing else available. You wouldn't have clothes, you wouldn't have anything else except your emergency preparedness stuff.
And we couldn't do just carry on. We'd have to have a big old suitcase rolling behind us.
So we think that there's a finite list that you can carry and be prepared. Our download also includes a handy chart of what to do in case of each type of emergency.
You should have some of your key paperwork in hard copy in case your cell phone dies or the internet stops working, including the phone number for your Airbnb host if you're using that platform.
Then if you're an American, go to the travel advice pages on the travel.state.gov website. The website provides all sorts of valuable information about a country before you visit, including local laws, travel advisories, emergency phone numbers for U.S. citizens, and more. You can also register your dates and the country you're visiting through the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program called STEP. That program has a downloadable app, and it provides real-time updates about health, weather, safety, and security in the country. And it also allows the embassy or consulate to contact you if there's an emergency. For
UK citizens, it's the Foreign Office website, and other countries have similar advice for their citizens. One thing to note is what the destination is prone to. Is it earthquakes, hurricanes, flooding, or whatever? This isn't about being paranoid, but assessing the risks. So if a crisis does occur, it doesn't come as a total surprise. Being aware you're in, for example, an earthquake zone will mean you aren't caught completely off guard if the ground starts shaking and rumbling underneath you.
And as we mentioned, understand the specific risks if certain natural disasters like floods are likely to happen at the time of year you're there. If we're booking far in advance, we typically do a web search regarding the weather we can expect during the time of our visit. And then we take into account that weather is unpredictable, but at least this gives us a sense of what to expect. For instance, here we are in Taiwan, and it's not rainy season. Rainy season's not supposed to happen till June, but it's been raining quite a lot.
You could have fooled us. We looked it up again. It's like, we did not book this in rainy season, right? Because it won't stop.
And that just proves my point that for everything you try to do to be prepared, sometimes you're still going to be caught off guard. You might want to seek out a travel insurance policy that will cover you for medical bills and repatriation. It should also cover cancellations and if you have to cut your trip short. Read the fine print though, because some events won't be covered if they're known events. So if you're planning to buy travel insurance, do it at the very beginning when you are first booking your trip, because if you wait, it could be too late.
As full-time travelers, travel insurance would be quite high for us since we need to have it year-round. But we do have a medical health insurance that covers us as we travel, and it's a global health insurance policy. And it even covers us for a few months when we're back in the US.
It does help with repatriation, but it doesn't cover any kind of cancellation fees or any problems like that. So we just manage the risk of that happening. It's more affordable for us to do it that way, but you have to make the decision for yourself.
Whether or not you have travel insurance, make sure that your health insurance covers when you leave the borders of your own country. Also check the fine print on your credit card. It may cover a lot of things like flight cancellations and things that you book with that credit card, so just look at the details.
Do a web search for what emergency service apps are there in the city you're visiting. But be sure you download and take a look at the apps before you need them. The Taiwan Overseas Travel Safety app helps users find the nearest Taiwanese embassy or representative office. It wasn't really useful if you're not Taiwanese, so I'm glad I checked first before I relied on it. The search also pulled up emergency numbers for police and for fire and ambulance services.
Make sure you also know the contact information for your local embassy.
We know there's a lot of mixed feelings regarding using Airbnbs, especially with their cancellation policies, but we're pleased to say that there's a new policy that they just put in place that is called Extenuating Circumstances Policy that allows for cancellation if the location that you're headed to has some natural disaster event. You can go online and read the details. If disaster strikes, follow the instructions of local emergency services, and most of all, prioritize your personal safety. Take your passport, your cell phone, and a small bug-out bag, but leave behind your other material possessions. They're not worth the time to gather them, and they'll be a liability in an emergency. It's always a good idea to keep receipts as proof of payments you've made so you can be reimbursed for anything that's happening during this natural disaster.
And after an emergency happens, make sure that you contact your family or anybody that needs to know where you are, that you're safe, and check with your insurance company if there's some damages or if there's problems with your health or anybody that you're traveling with.
You may not be able to contact them directly, but pass that information on to a loved one with the travel insurance policy number so that they can help on your behalf. And again, this is one of those situations where I highly recommend that you write down all your important names and numbers. I do not know how to reach my kids without my cell phone. I don't have those numbers memorized. So take the time and write down even the ones you think, of course, I'll know these.
Depending on the type of emergency, you may decide to cut your trip short and leave as early as possible. But remember that tourists don't rank above locals, and you may not be able to get the transportation you want, and you will not get priority over the people that need help in an emergency. During our Houston hurricane, many restaurants and shops were closed, so it's a good idea to have a few snacks or food that doesn't require refrigeration or heating when you're traveling, especially if you're traveling to a place during a hurricane season.
Some other basic preparedness ideas are to keep your cell phone and any spare batteries charged at all times. Make sure you keep your water bottles full, and don't let your prescriptions run low.
For whatever natural disaster you've gone through, getting home may be a problem. Airports may be closed. You may have to take alternate travel, like a train ride to another country. Whatever it is, take a breath, breathe through it. Time isn't as big a concern as your health and your safety.
And please be understanding of all of the workers that you're going to come in contact with. Everybody's stress levels are very high and they're trying to help as many people as possible. So of course it may mean that you can't get through to change your flights or that there's long hold times, but don't take it out on the agents or the people who are trying to solve the problems. We hope this episode has given you some tips and ideas to think about before you need them. And the best compliment you can give to us is to recommend our videos to your family and friends.
And check out findingginaMarie.com, where you'll find our community forum, articles, and our packing list for travel emergencies.
Until next time.
Until next time.